Well, good morning, y'all. Welcome, and welcome to Psychology 201 here at LBCC. We're going to be covering a wide variety of topics this year, or this term. 201 is part one of a two-part sequence that is the fundamentals of psychology. So here in 201, we'll be starting all of that textbook that we'll be talking about, and if you take 202, you'll finish the textbook there. So 201 and 202 are two parts of one whole. So we're looking at 201, so we're taking the first half of that whole. So what we're going to be talking about this term is stuff like the history of psychology, how do we do research, and what are some of the big experiments in our field that you should know about. We'll talk about biology, we'll talk about neurons and genetics and how all that relates to psychology and how we do studies. We'll also talk about development through the lifespan. We'll talk about sex, gender, and sexuality. We'll get into sensation and perception, which is a fascinating chapter. So many interesting things that can go on with perception and how we perceive the world around there. And then there's that little part of that particular chapter is one of my favorite parts of the class when we talk about illusions and visual perceptual illusions, that kind of stuff. That's really a fun chapter. So I'm looking forward to working with y'all on that one. We also talk about learning, so how do we learn habits, how do we learn behaviors, and then we wrap up the term a little bit with memory and thinking, so diving into a little bit more about cognitive psychology, about how the brain works above and beyond the biology of it, like how do we think, how do we process, how do we make decisions, how does memory work, and what are some of the failures in it. And that's another really interesting chapter. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the cool memory stuff and some of the malleability of memory as well. It's an interesting section as well. So there's lots of fun topics that we're going to be talking about this particular term here in 201, and I hope you're looking forward to it like I am. Now, this is an asynchronous class, which means we will not be meeting on Zoom at all. You will be moving at your own pace through the class with guidelines and deadlines each week to help keep you on track. But for the most part, you're moving through the week at your own pace. So you're supposed to be able to do your reading at your own pace, do the lectures online at your own pace, complete the discussions and the quizzes at your own pace, but you will have to be able to have some of that internal motivation to be able to propel you forward through this, because we will not be meeting on Zoom. That does not mean, however, that I am unavailable to you. I am still available. You just have to email me or come to my office hours rather than seeing me every week on Zoom. So I am here to help you through the class, to answer whatever questions that you might have, but it's a little bit less face-to-face kind of an environment, okay? I'd also like to mention that when it comes to the time expectations of the class, colleges expect anywhere between 2 to 3 hours per week per unit for a class worth of work outside of the normal class period. So for example, in a 4-unit class, usually that relates to approximately 4 hours in class per week. So it would be like a 2-hour Monday, Wednesday class, something like that, right? Then, on top of that 4 hours, the college says that you should be spending an additional 2 to 3 hours per week per unit on homework and outside work, outside reading, all of that other stuff. So that relates to 8 to 12 hours in a 4-unit class. So that would be 4 hours a week in class and an additional 8 to 12 hours outside of class. So that's the expectation of the college, that each 4-unit class is taking you a total of approximately 12 to 16 hours per week worth of work. So I don't think my class does that. For the most part, people tell me it's not quite that long. But I wanted to let y'all know that those are the expectations. I know here in the remote world, we're getting more and more and more busy. We're having more and more things that are coming up in the terms and in our lives. And so I just want to make sure that you have the time to be able to dedicate to your classes and you understand what those expectations are and how much work you're committing to in this particular class. Don't worry, it's fun stuff. Like I said, we'll have lots and lots of fun things to talk about. But it will take up a little bit of your time, okay? Okay, so I've been talking here, and we've been kind of looking at our homepage on the Moodle system here, and what I'm about to do is just kind of walk you through the Moodle system, show you around, introduce you to some of the pieces there, and show you what to expect from the class, all right? So if we start off, here's my little introduction, welcome, welcome. Over here on the left-hand side, you can see each one of these chapters. So if you want to jump ahead to a specific week, you are certainly welcome to. But if we just kind of scroll down the page, this welcome video right here is what we're filming right now, so you'll be able to watch that. Hopefully you've already found that. But right now it's just a placeholder, that's why it looks a little bit different. Underneath that, I'd like y'all to please download and read this syllabus. This syllabus has all of the information about what to expect from the class. It talks about what are the assignments, what are your point earners, what are the due dates, how do you get through the class, what are my expectations when it comes to grading. Okay, it has all that stuff in there. So please download this, keep it, read it, and if I were you, I'd actually print off a copy of it, at the very least the last page, which has a calendar of due dates for you. That way you can make sure that you're right on top of everything that you need to stay on top of, and you're not running late behind anything. It's a nice easy checklist you can go through and just check stuff off as you do it, okay? Now, our textbook this term is a little different. It's not the standard traditional buy it at the bookstore printed textbook. We're using a e-book here at LBCC now. So we're using the Achieve software and system for the ebook that we're talking about. So you can access the ebook right here. You'll have to get a access code from the bookstore. So you have to buy the access code from the bookstore. And then you can go in, you can create an account through Achieve if you have never worked with this system before. It's easy to create the account, it just takes a couple of minutes, it doesn't cost you anything. If you're asking for pay and you've already paid for the access code, there's a problem. Let's talk, okay? Once you pay for the access code at the bookstore, you shouldn't have to pay for anything else. So you can sign yourself up and get yourself an account through this particular program, and then we'll do all of our reading in that particular system. Each week you'll have an Achieve, Learn and Grow, I think they're called, but it's a interactive chapter where you can do activities within the chapter where it'll give you little questions here and there. It's all designed to help you recall and remember the information better because you've processed it at a deeper level, okay? So it's a relatively new thing to the college. We've been working with it this entire year, but it is an adjustment and a change. So your textbook is actually an ebook right here, and the biggest question I get for the ebooks is, does it have an audio read to me feature? Yes, it does have an audio read to me feature, so you can have it going and you can listen to it if you're an audio person rather than a visual person, okay? So this week, you'll have to go in there. There's an orientation and a quiz telling you kind of how to use the system and all that other stuff. So this is required for the class. You are going to earn points for doing the Achieve reading every week. And Achieve will not give you points if you are late. So you got to make sure you stay up on top of this. It'll keep the chapters open so you can still go back and reference all the information, but you won't be able to earn any points unless you do it by the due dates, by each weekly due date. So each chapter or each week has a new chapter. You got to make sure you finish all of those activities before the end of the week is out, or else Achieve will not give you any points for it. It's not at all forgiving when it comes to lateness. So just be aware that you have to go in this week. All you got to do is go in, get your access code, figure out the technology, get your account and all that other kind of stuff. Once you get into Achieve, there's a orientation and a quiz. Make sure you can do those things, but our chapter reading actually begins next week. So you're welcome to start ahead if you'd like to. In fact, once you're done with this welcome section, I'd recommend you jump into next week. But for this week, the only thing you have to do is that orientation and orientation quiz to make sure that you are hooked into the system, you know what you're doing, you can kind of look around, get used to it a little bit, okay? So our textbook is right here. You can click the link through there, get yourself your access code through the bookstore, set up your account, and begin reading and doing your orientation quiz this week, all right? Underneath that, I've got a couple of other just helpful documents in case you are relatively new to online school or you're not really comfortable with it, you're finding that it's much more difficult than face-to-face. Here's some things that I've been working on and that have helped other students in the past. Okay, so first of all is how to succeed in remote courses, just a little bit of some tips and information there. Netiquette, so guidelines on behavioral expectations for how to interact with your students, your co-students, and how to behave professionally here online, and then some study tips. So we'll jump more into memory later, But here's some study tips on kind of what to look for and how to help yourself study as we go. Because when we dive into memory, it's like the end of the term, and it seems unfair to me to give y'all the study tips at the end of the term instead of the beginning of the term. So here I wanted to give you the base information, but we'll actually come back and we'll review it all in more depth when we get to that chapter in the term, okay? So we'll come back to this study tips idea. My office hour runs Tuesdays from noon to 2 p.m. There's the link right there. You're welcome to come by anytime. I do have a waiting room set up, so if it's telling you you're not let in or just to hold on, just wait a minute, I'm with another student. It doesn't usually take very long, and rarely do I have students overlap. So if you have questions, please feel free to come on in. We also have a class project this term, so I'll discuss more a little bit later, but our point earners include reading the book and doing the activities in the book, the quizzes in the book, doing a weekly discussion. We have a midterm and a final, and then we have this class project as well. So the class project, it's a relatively in-depth essay where I'm going to ask you to read a journal article, which I'm going to warn y'all, journal articles can be dense, they can be dry, they can be a little slower to read, so make sure you are looking at this set of directions this week so you know what it is you have to do, and you can schedule yourself enough time accordingly to make sure you get it done. But in general, I'm going to have you read an article, a peer-reviewed article published in a professional journal, and then I'm going to have you read a journal, or not a journal, a newspaper like summary of it. So like a secondary source instead of a primary source. It's going to be a secondary source describing the journal article that you read. Okay, so reading the journal article and then reading another article describing the journal article that you read. And then you're going to take a look at how well the second article describes the first one. Does it do a good job? Does it represent the information correctly? Does it represent it with the same tone and conclusions that the authors themselves do? And we do this so that as you're going through and reading stuff like Psychology Today, that's like, oh my gosh, studies now show that, blah, 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 you'll be able to understand some of the benefits and limitations of reading this secondary source article, okay? So we do have a class project. It's a relatively in-depth one where you're going to have to read several articles and stuff like that put together, and then write a comparison and analysis on that. So I wanted to give you the complete directions so you can look at it this week, but it's not due until week 8. So make sure you download it, take a look at it. Like I said, schedule yourself whatever time it is that you need to be able to do that. Just put that into your calendar right now so that you know what's going on. And again, that's, like I said, that's due week 8, so the Dropbox for the submission is actually in Module 8. It's in the module for week 8, so this is just the directions, all right? Okay, as we continue down our Moodle page, we can see that this week's point earners are our introductions and our syllabus quiz. So our discussion this week, and you'll have a discussion every week, but our discussion this week is simply a chance to introduce yourself to everybody else. Let's get to know each other a little bit. This is an asynchronous class, but we still can have really good interactions. We can have, really good conversations. They just happen via written text rather than, verbal face-to-face interactions. So the discussion is where we're going to have a lot of our interactions. So please put aside enough time each week to really dedicate and put effort into these discussions, because like I said, that's where we're going to get our back and forths, that's where we're going to get our peer conversations, our teaching and our learning from each other. So these are going to be an important part of our asynchronous class. These kind of take the place of our in-class activities and group work, okay? And then the syllabus quiz down here is just covering the syllabus, and really it's just a way to make sure that you have read the syllabus. So read the syllabus. You can have the syllabus printed off and everything like that, but please do this particular syllabus quiz because, like I said, it makes sure that you have read the syllabus and you are aware of some of the major expectations of the class. All right? All right, and if you've made it that far, you are now at the end of this week's requirements. If you're done and you have a little bit of extra time, I'd suggest you jump into next week's requirements. Okay, so next week we start Chapter 1, Psychology's Roots. So there will be both Achieve book reading and Achieve quiz due Sunday. And I have put in my own lectures here through the term as well. So in each week, you will see my lectures here. So the History of Psychology lecture, it'll take you to YouTube, much like this did, where you can put on the closed caption down there at the bottom if you need to. So here's the lecture, and then the accompanying slides. So if you want to be able to print them off for easy reference, you're welcome to do so. Okay? So lecture, slides, and it just kind of goes down like that, right? Every now and then, I'll toss in an extra handout. Okay, so when I give you these handouts do not earn you points. But what they will do is help you understand and apply the concepts that we're talking about. So I highly, highly recommend doing all of the handouts. But you do not need to turn them in to me. They will not earn you any points. So if you are a student who's got 5 classes and 4 kids and a full-time job, and you're starting up your own nonprofit organization and you simply don't have the time, well, that's on you. You're an adult and you can choose how much time and effort you put into the class. But this is where a lot of that extra study and learning time comes in, is in doing some of these application handouts. Reading the book is a wonderful start, because reading the information and being exposed to the information is the basis of what learning is. But reading the book does not do everything you need it to. My lectures will give you the information in a different way. It'll tell it to you, describe it in different terms. Maybe it'll help make those concepts click. I will also give you different concepts or different examples in the lecture than you'll see in the books. So I do recommend both the lectures and the books. You'll get a fuller, more complete understanding of the course. But that's just hearing the information, and hearing the information does not help you process the information, okay? Taking notes will help you process the information, and doing these various activities and handouts applying the information to real-life situations will also help you understand and process the information more. So again, I highly, highly recommend that you do these various handouts that I give you each chapter and each module, but they do not earn you any points, okay? So you do not have to turn them in to me, all right? As we're going through, I give you some bonus lectures sometimes. Sometimes I give you just a little bit of extra here because people ask me a lot of questions. So Freud is one of the earliest names in psychology, and he's one of the people that, you know, is a big, well-known name, but not many people really understand his concepts. And the book doesn't cover him in great depth. So I wanted to give you all more information about Freud if you were interested, because like I said, he's an interesting cat. And so here's a little bit more about what Freud thought and what his theories were and all that other stuff. And it's interesting, not because we still prescribe by these ideas, which, I mean, to some extent, some people do. There are still psychoanalysts out there. But for the most part, there's a lack of evidence that really supports Freud. But you can still see his concepts interwoven into our culture. So the concept of the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other shoulder, that's an id and superego concept. That's a Freudian concept. So if you understand what Freud's concepts were, you can see examples of them all throughout our culture. It's an interesting kind of side note or rabbit hole to dive down. I do give y'all several rabbit holes to dive down in this class. I'm going to warn you ahead of time. And the reason that I do that is because I believe it's my job to inspire you to be more interested in psychology. It's not my job to weed out those who are not good enough for my field, which I've heard some, especially university instructors, talk about. My job is to inspire you to want to do more with psychology, because psychology needs more voices, right? We need more people doing more studies. When we get into chapter 1, we'll talk a little bit about the history, and we'll see that the history is very narrow, okay? The scope of psychology really only looked at a very narrow range of subjects. Therefore, we kind of assumed and we created these assumptions of normality based on this very narrow range of people. So as we're discovering more and more what a mistake that is, because that doesn't generalize very well, we need more people doing more studies and listening to more voices. So my job as a teacher is to inspire you to try and do more with psychology, to give us your voices, to give us your opinions and your thoughts, right? So I give you lots of rabbit holes to dive down in case you'd like to follow an interest. The rabbit holes, again, they're optional. You do not have to do them, so if you're a busy student, it's okay. You're not going to lose points if you don't dive down these rabbit holes. But if you have some time and you're at all interested, you can pick and choose which rabbit holes to dive down, and you'll really find some interesting stuff in the class, all right? So Freud here, that's one of those first rabbit holes. It is an optional lecture. It's recommended, but it's an optional lecture that dives a little bit deeper into that. Now, as we continue down here, we'll find what we call skeleton notes. And the skeleton notes, again, these are optional. I've had students in the past ask me what's the best way to outline the information so that I can make most use of it. So this is my suggestions on how to note take for the term. Okay, so the skeleton notes, it's essentially just a skeleton. It's a handout skeleton where I've given you a term, and it's up to you to fill in all of the blanks as you go through my lectures. So it'll help you organize and kind of process the information. But again, this one is optional. You do not have to do the skeleton notes. I've had some people tell me they really help them. I've had a couple people tell me they really don't. So it's up to you if you'd like to utilize those. Those are just there to try and help you out. And then you've got another activity here. So find my family. It's a sorting exercise, right? So this is another one of those handouts. Highly recommended, but you do not have to turn it in. In fact, here's a key. This is what I would have done, how I would have organized and sorted all of these keywords. But a lot of times my handouts are more along the lines of critical thinking. There isn't really one yes or no answer. There isn't a right or a wrong. If you can explain to me why you think it goes with this or why you think it goes with that, that works too. So if you disagree and you have a good reason, okay, I understand, I get it, right? But again, you don't have to turn those in. They're just to help you understand. And then we jump into scientific principles, so lecture slide, lecture slides, another handout. Again, really will help you out, but do not have to turn it in. Another handout, okay, lecture slides, skeleton notes, optional note-taking opportunity for you, and then a couple of other handouts that will help you, okay? When we get down to the end of the week, we have our weekly discussion. You'll notice there's no quiz here in Moodle. That's because the quiz is over there in Achieve. Remember, you have to do your textbook reading, and the quiz is at the end of the chapter in Achieve. Now, the quiz is what will not record if you are late. Okay, so you got to make sure you get that quiz done by its due date, or else it won't give you any points for it, all right? So make sure you get your reading done. I would suggest doing your reading like Monday, Tuesday, listening to the lectures Monday, Tuesday, making sure you have all of your notes, you know, doing some activities or some handouts Tuesday, Wednesday. Do your discussions, which will always be due Wednesday nights, and then your responses are due on Friday. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday might be, you know, activities days, or, you know, processing your notes, you know, that kind of stuff. And then your quizzes are always going to be due, I'm pretty sure it's Sunday. But make sure you get your quizzes in there by the end of that week. Okay, so that's how I would approach the week if I were you. So reading and lectures Monday, Tuesday, you know, Wednesday, Thursday, maybe Friday, doing your activities and your studying, and then make sure you finish up the quiz Saturday, no later than Sunday. Okay? Now, next week, we're talking about psychology's roots and research, so I want to warn y'all that I've given you a bunch of rabbit holes here at the beginning. So these are all extra videos on a variety of different research methods. So in my research methods lecture, I briefly introduce a half a dozen different famous experiments. And if you want to know more about any of those experiments, here's where they are right here, right? So you can dive in and you can go find out more about each one of those experiments. There's a whole bunch of them, but again, these are these rabbit holes to dive down, okay? There's lots of them. They are not required. I've tried to include how long they are so you can see how much time you're trying to devote to each one of them, all right? But they're interesting things. I'll leave them up all term, so if you're bored here and there and you're like, I got 10 minutes, let me go watch one of those videos that Laura suggested. That might be a beneficial thing to do, okay? So again, these are all just rabbit holes to dive down, optional, but very, very interesting. What I do want you to do this week, so let's recap here for just a second. What I want you to do this week is I want you to work through this Welcome to Psych 201 module. So start here at the Welcome video, which you're doing now. Download, read your syllabus, find out how to hook yourself into the textbook, make sure you understand how to succeed in the class, check out the class project, introduce yourself to the class, and do the syllabus quiz. Those are the things you have to do this week. Now, LBCC requires that I drop students who haven't done any work in the first week. So as long as you're doing the introduction or the syllabus quiz, both of which are due by the end of the first week, then you have a grade in the class and I won't drop you. But if you haven't done any of these assignments by the end of the first week, then on Monday of week 2, LBCC requires I drop non-attending students. It's designed to help you out and make sure that you don't get nicked in the end with it. But it does mean you really have to make sure you turn in something this week. Make sure you turn it in on time because otherwise you risk being dropped from the class next week. Okay? So this week, do the Welcome to Psych 201 chapter, or module, I should say. If you get done with that relatively quickly, I would jump into next week because next week has got some interesting information and lots of rabbit holes that you could potentially dive down into. All right? All right. That's what I've got for y'all for this particular welcome video. To recap, I just want to let y'all know again that for your point earners, the only things that will earn you points in the class are the weekly discussions, the weekly quizzes. This one is here in Moodle, but most of the other quizzes are in the Achieve textbook, and they will not record a grade after the due date. So make sure you do those Achieve quizzes before the due date in order to get your credit for it. If you do them beforehand, they're set up to be able to give you multiple chances. You can take the test again and again. So it's designed to be low stress. You just have to do it by the due date. It's my way of making sure that we keep up to date in this asynchronous class, right? Instead of meeting face-to-face and keeping you up to date that way, we're making sure we're staying up to date with the due dates. So each week you will have discussions and quizzes that will earn you points. We have a midterm and a final that earns us points. And then we have that class project. So please go and take a look at that class project and make sure that you understand what's going on with it so that you can give yourself enough time to complete it well. Okay? If you have any questions on anything in the class, please go through this intro section, read the syllabus, and then if you still have questions after that, please feel free to shoot me an email or come to my office hours during week 1, and I'll gladly answer whatever questions I can. Remember, I am here to help you out through the term, even though this is an asynchronous class. I look forward to getting to know everybody through the discussions, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Again, welcome to 201, and I'll talk with y'all later.